My wife canceled our date night, rejected my advances, and embarrassed me in public, so I planned a fishing trip to make her feel neglected. My wife and I have been together for almost 20 years, and our bedroom has been slowly but surely decaying for the past 15 years. A few months ago, we sat down and had a talk about how to rekindle the spark we once had. We agreed that date nights were one of the most important things to do, and among other things seemed to improve, albeit only slightly. When it comes to dates, I'm rejected 90% of the time with the usual excuses such as being too tired, not in the mood, the kids waking up and being 18, not wanting to see me, not feeling well, a headache, aches behavior, and my personal favorite, you have to get up early for work anyway. Over the past 2 months, I've scheduled 9 date nights, but my wife has canceled 7 of them, often without warning. Some dates were even planned weeks in advance. She would suddenly show up after work and announce that she was going out with friends. When I mentioned our planned date night, she claimed she just forgot about it, even though it was marked on the fridge calendar again. It was her idea, so by this weekend, I spent 2 weeks arranging a date night. Imagine the whole weekend in a 5-star hotel suite, dinner at a Michelin-starred restaurant, theater tickets, things she's always wanted to do, even including buying a few nice outfits, so I picked her up after work. I packed some casual clothes and toiletries for both of us. I told her I had a surprise planned, and she immediately started protesting that she had something to do right now. I had already checked the calendar and asked her friends, and they didn't have any plans for the weekend. I told her everything was already arranged and that she didn't have to worry. She asked questions about the clothes, but I told her I had already taken care of it. She seemed to calm down, and we set off. Despite the cold atmosphere in the car, we arrived at the hotel and checked in a few hours later. She seemed to perk up when she saw our suite. When she asked me what I had planned, I told her. Shopping, sightseeing, dinner, and a show. So we had a light meal at the hotel restaurant and then went out sightseeing. On Saturday, we went shopping early and returned to the hotel a few hours later to prepare dinner. When she emerged from the bathroom, I can't describe in words how beautiful she looked, wearing a dark blue evening dress with matching underwear, 4-inch heels, jewelry, and the perfect hairstyle and makeup. Suffice it to say, my jaw dropped when I saw her. She smiled at me and twirled around, looking just as stunning as she did on our wedding day. Dinner went well, and although we hardly spoke to each other, we called a cab and headed to the theater. At least I got a thank you. I also arranged for a couple of mutual friends to go to the theater with us. They got us tickets, we sat down, and were enjoying the show when the intermission started. I put my hand on hers and asked if she liked the show. To my surprise, she yanked her hand back as if it had been bitten by a poisonous snake. She looked me straight in the eye and told me that whatever I was thinking in the hotel tonight, I could forget it. Her words were almost full of disdain and venom, so that the few people around us heard them. Our friends didn't know where to look or what to say. My wife asked me to change seats because she needed to go to the bathroom. A sudden burst of anger welled up inside me, and I got up to apologize to my friends, telling them I was leaving and hoping they would enjoy the rest of the show. When I returned to the hotel room, I received a text message from a friend telling me that they had told my wife that I had left and that she had just shrugged her shoulders and remained furious. I decided to go home, so I packed my clothes, took a taxi to the nearest train station, and caught the last train home. I left a note and the car keys for my wife so that she could get home by herself between the time she received the text message from her friend and the time she got home. I didn't receive any text messages or phone calls from my wife asking if I was okay, or even where I was in the morning. I decided to move into the guest room. I noticed that I needed some new bedroom furniture, so I went to IKEA. This was not my best decision, especially on a Sunday morning. Having given up on assembling the Easy Pack box in one day, my wife asked about the new furniture. I think she realized something was up when she noticed my clothes and other personal items were missing from the master bedroom. She didn't say anything until about an hour ago, when she asked me why I was being so childish. I politely explained about the date night I had previously sacrificed for a friend, which seemed completely unnecessary to me. She blew up at me during the intermission at the theater. She just shrugged and asked if I was only interested in intimacy. I picked up on her attitude when I picked her up from work at her company on Friday afternoon, and I wanted to surprise her by bringing up her attitude. She told me I'm currently sitting on the back deck, typing away on my laptop while sipping on a large coffee, trying to figure out what to do next. Anger still churns within me. Thanks for responding. My son is halfway through his university program. For now, I'm treating her with the same coldness she's shown me. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe she is. No, but I want her to feel it. I'm planning a fishing trip this weekend with an old friend I haven't seen in years. I have no intention of telling her where I'm going or who I'm going with. I'll leave on Friday afternoon before she gets off work. I don't know if she expects or just assumes I'll pick her up from work. There's no cell phone reception where we'll be fishing, so I'll be mostly out of contact. My son can contact my emergency contact if needed. The closest thing I could do to apologize was when she said, "Okay, I may have overreacted a bit." I tried to remain calm, otherwise I might do something that would come back to bite me later. All options are currently on the table, so I don't rule out divorce. Update 1. Where do I begin? My best friend contacted me and asked what was going on, as apparently my wife, I'll call her Beth, had only told her part of the story, so I gave her a detailed account of all the details, which she said was understated, and then asked me what I planned to do, considering that I had planned a trip to Paris later in the year to celebrate our wedding anniversary, which I said was off because of her behavior at the theater. My dear wife still has not apologized for her behavior. SL erupts. She still claims she may have overreacted. Her exact words were, "Beth immediately called my wife and put her on speakerphone." Beth proceeded to verbally abuse her and further insulted her by revealing our planned trip to Paris to celebrate our anniversary. My wife then ranted on and on about how she knew I would get over it because I could not say no to her, and her happiness vanished when Beth told her I had canceled the trip 10 minutes earlier. As for our domestic life, since she decided to let me move back into the master bedroom, I decided to tell Kate that her belongings and personal items would be moved to the guest room and a lock would be installed on the door to the master bedroom. She was furious about this until I gave her the choice of either her being in the guest room or me moving out, as the situation was such that I was not prepared to share a room with her for the foreseeable future. I was also dealing with our finances, and my name had been removed from our joint account, and the credit limit on the joint credit card had been reduced to the minimum to prevent her from spending extravagantly. She hasn't noticed any of this yet. I've asked friends for help, installed audio and video equipment in the house, and so far I've found no evidence that she's cheating on me, as others have suggested. I've also got her phone and installed an app just to confirm my initial findings. I've also turned the house upside down in case she's got another phone hidden somewhere, but I've found nothing suspicious. I've also spoken to a lawyer about separation and divorce. I recently renewed my passport, and as soon as my wife got it, she asked if I was going to Paris again. I said no, and that the chances of a new plan were almost zero. Then she asked why I renewed my passport if that was the case. I said that I had saved up almost 2 months of vacation time over the past year and this year, so I planned to fly to California to visit an old friend. We had arranged to spend 2 weeks there, and then go to Ohio for a few days to catch up with another friend. Her jaw dropped to the ground, and she seemed to want to say something, but she couldn't. Yesterday morning when I got home from work, I found her sitting at the kitchen table, and Beth was there too. Judging from the expression on my wife's face, I could only guess that Beth had attacked her again. After confirming with the mutual friends who were present at the time, it seemed that my wife had been crying the whole time. Judging by her eyes and expression, Beth stood up and looked at me and said that my wife had something to say to me and that she wanted to give us some privacy. I raised my hand to stop her and asked her to continue as a witness to the conversation that followed. I had already set my phone to record in case my wife started to speak. Before I interrupted her, she had only managed to say part of the first sentence, which seemed to be an appropriate apology. I'm not sure if it was a sincere apology because, as I said, I interrupted her before she could finish. Then I took 2 A4 envelopes from my bag and placed them on the table in front of her and explained what was in the envelopes. The first envelope contained a draft divorce agreement prepared by my lawyer, and it was likely that we would end up getting divorced. On hearing this, she started to cry again, and her friend comforted her, asking her what she thought I would do, as she mentioned that Beth had noticed my cold tone during our conversation. Beth also implied that my wife had gone too far, humiliating me in front of her friends after I had gone to so much trouble to arrange everything. And as it turned out, my wife herself admitted, it was her hope that I would surprise her with a proposal when she had calmed down. I went on to explain that the envelope contained a list of private consultants for marital SLP, with a note for her to choose one. She was then given an ultimatum to choose one from the envelope, that I would be leaving on Sunday morning on the first flight to the U.S., and she had to make a decision before I returned, as I refused to be spoken to and treated as I had that evening, adding that she hadn't seen it, and I was still not sure if she had, that her reaction was unnecessary and had gone overboard before she had even responded. I told her unequivocally that if she started shouting at me, the second option would be immediately removed from the equation. I also reiterated that if I found out she had been seeing someone else while I was away, I would definitely choose the first option. Update 2. I had a great time in the US with friends and finally returned home. Back in the UK, I turned on my phone and, my God, I thought it was going to explode. There were messages, voicemails, emails, and missed calls, most from my wife and a few from friends and family. It turned out that during that fateful weekend, our mutual friends had told my parents what had happened, and some other mutual friends had also asked after me, as I had been virtually silent since I had set off on my trip. Over the weekend, my friends had told my parents what had happened, and some mutual friends had also asked after me, as I had been virtually out of contact since I had set off on my trip. My wife's messages began with the usual empty cliches, and I gathered that she was being insincere when she apologized for not having been able to meet my request for replies. The messages became increasingly threatening and menacing, almost to the point of being threatening. I called to tell her that I had returned to the UK and would be home after a brief stay at my mother's. She seemed overenthusiastic and sweet on the phone, which made me wonder if she was the same person I left when I set off for the US. So I told my mom what had happened and why I was going on the trip. She said she understood, but was very upset that I had left without telling her in person. I called her and left a voicemail, but she didn't know how to listen to it. That's just how my mom is. No text. Savvy. By the way, anyway, when I got home, my wife almost knocked me over with a rugby ball, and then when she came in again, she gave me a warm hug as if nothing had happened. I explained that the flight had tired me out, and that at the moment I just wanted a hot shower and a nap. I went upstairs and put my suitcase in the spare room, as it was the room closest to the stairs. Before taking a shower, my wife said nothing, although I heard her quietly go upstairs, hang around in the stairwell, and even try to open our bathroom door, only to find it locked from the inside. She took a shower and then returned downstairs. I collapsed on the bed in the spare room and slept for a few hours. When I woke up, I went downstairs and sat opposite my wife. She immediately got up, smiled, and sat again in my lap, being overly affectionate. She chatted with me, asking me if I had a good trip and where I went and what I saw. I asked her to get off my lap and sit on the sofa next to me, and bluntly asked her if she had decided what to do with the 2 envelopes. If I gave them to her before I left, she just laughed at me and asked if I was serious, because she thought I was just childishly throwing a tantrum. I told her I was serious, and if she had thought about it, she just sneered at me and told me to stop being silly and forget about it. I replied that she had already given me her answer and thanked her for letting me know where she stood. At that point, I called the lawyer and asked him to draft 2 documents. It was an old schoolmate of hers. Although I hated calling her on a Friday afternoon, when she would probably be with her family, she asked what choice my wife had made. I told her I didn't want to discuss it over the phone, but that I would make an appointment to discuss it face-to-face the following week and explain my choice. She must have expected my call, because she said she had scheduled a possible meeting for Monday afternoon. As I wrote down the appointment time, I noticed my wife staring at me with a knife. Her face was very ugly. I thought she might have a stroke or heart attack soon, or both. After the call ended, I turned to face her, and before she had time to say anything, I told her that a choice had been made and that I meant it. Later, I heard her on the phone crying to her best friend for help, asking what to do about the situation. I couldn't hear the rest of the conversation, but from the sound of her crying, I can only guess that it wasn't what she wanted to hear at the moment. While writing this, I'm also watching the hours of footage from the home security system that was installed before I left, in case she has some mailman come over while I'm gone, if you know what I mean, because as others have replied and suggested, she may be having an affair with someone else. And in either case, I want proof, and that's where I am right now. Oh, and my dog keeps pestering me. He keeps looking at me, rubbing up against me, trying to sit in my lap, wanting me to pet him, so I Asked him if he wanted to go for a walk. He looks like he's about to explode with excitement right now. Second thing, at 1 a.m., a strange guy shows up at my parents' house looking for me and uses details from my life 20 years ago to help me figure it out. This happened 3 days ago, and I'm going crazy trying to figure it out. I just moved into a new apartment a month ago and am still unpacking and settling in. I've been using my parents' address as my mailing address, and they live a few towns away, 20 minutes from me. I've been using their address my whole life. 3 days ago, at 2 a.m., my parents called me, terrified, and told me what had happened. Apparently, at 1 a.m., someone started knocking on their front door and ringing the doorbell repeatedly. My stepdad went downstairs to open the door, but the front glass door was closed and locked. There was a man standing outside, in his 30s, wearing a black hoodie with the hood pulled up to cover his face. There were no visible facial features, body hair, or tattoos. My stepfather only said that he looked Spanish. Neither my stepfather nor my mother, who was standing outside the window, recognized the man. The man said, "I'm sorry to bother you, but I'm looking for my full name." My stepfather pretended to be dumb, and the man repeated my full name again and said that my boyfriend was very worried because I didn't come home that night. He claimed to be a friend of my boyfriend and told my stepfather that they were all outside looking for me and were worried because I hadn't come home. I don't have a boyfriend. I live alone with my 3 dogs and have not been in a relationship for the past 5 to 6 months. Strangely, my stepfather asked the man who he was talking about as a boyfriend, and the man told him the name of my boyfriend from 10th grade, which was 20 years ago. My boyfriend in 10th grade had a very unique Italian name, and I have never met anyone with a full name close to his. He said my high school boyfriend's name, making sure my stepdad heard, and repeated that they were very worried about me. Was my stepdad sure he wasn't in there? My stepdad was very suspicious, closed and locked the door, and the man didn't leave, just hung around the front of the parents' house for 10 minutes, smoking and making phone calls. Eventually, my parents called the police, and they arrived about 5 minutes later. The man walked to the end of their block and left in a silver car. My stepdad didn't get the license plate number. My parents called the police, but after I heard the story, nothing else happened. I'm freaking out about these strange details. How could someone know who I dated 20 years ago? What's the motive for making up a story with all these weird details from my past? I haven't been in touch with my 10th grade boyfriend for over a decade. Yesterday, I decided to message him on Facebook to see if he had any insight. I told him the whole story, and he was as confused as I was and claimed to have had nothing to do with it. I'm confused and scared because at 1 a.m., a strange man went to all this trouble to message me. Any insight or thoughts would be appreciated. Thanks. No, nothing else strange has happened since. Update 1. This is really disturbing. If this happened to me, my first theory is that my parents still live in the same house where I grew up, and everyone I went to school with knows the address. It's a nice house. People would think there would be good things in it. When I was a teenager, I briefly hung out with a group of shady people. They weren't too bad at the time, but now most of them are drug addicts and complete scumbags who have been in prison. If my parents told me this story, I would immediately think of someone I knew in high school who is now a drug addict and is casing the neighborhood, even deliberately targeting my parents' house because they already knew the layout, rang the doorbell to see if anyone was home. And when they answered, they had to make up a lie. So they chose this lie because knowing these details might allow them to plausibly deny that their real intention was to rob the house. And if they were caught, they could claim that they were confused. Update. My stepsister, my stepfather's daughter, and her fiancé attended a house party after the holidays in early January of this year. Just after they got there, they started chatting with a girl they didn't know. After a while, the girl started talking about her ex-boyfriend and the hard times they went through together. They had just broken up, and she felt really bad because he was a waste. Somehow, the conversation turned to the girl's ex-boyfriend, who was my boyfriend in 10th grade, who had a very unique Italian name. The whole situation wasn't that big of a coincidence because my stepsister and her fiancé, we have a lot of mutual friends, so it wasn't surprising that they ended up at a party where there were some of my high school friends. My stepsister and her fiancé had just arrived when the two of them started going crazy. Without giving away too many details, they told the girl the whole mysterious story and how strange it was. As they were telling the story, the girl's face started to turn pale, and she looked like she was about to cry. My stepsister and her fiancé tried to comfort her and asked her what was wrong. By this time, the wine and SL beer had been mostly drunk, so I believe everyone was a little drunk. The girl began to tell them that a few days ago, she was sleeping when someone started knocking on her door at 1 a.m. Just like what happened to my parents' house. The girl jumped out of bed and said she was terrified by the loud and aggressive manner of the person knocking on the door. She said she really thought someone was going to break in. The girl has a Ring camera, so she checked the camera with her phone and found that a man in a black hoodie was knocking on her door. She apparently pretended to be asleep and turned off all the lights. He kept knocking, and she was about to call 911. The man stopped and left. She said she was very scared at the time, not knowing why. She ultimately did not call the police, but may have gone to a friend's house to stay that night or the next night. My stepsister and her fiancé were shocked by the details and by my story, especially since we had a mutual ex-boyfriend. But this girl had really just broken up with him. They asked the girl if she knew who the man was, and she said no, but it definitely wasn't her real ex-boyfriend. She said the man was more than our mutual ex-boyfriend, which is a mystery that remains unsolved to this day, and these new details honestly just add to my confusion. No one else has shown up at my parents' house since the actual incident a year ago. The ex-boyfriend, who sounds like an Italian name, may have annoyed some bad elements who knew about his dating history, or he has a strange way of getting back at his ex-girlfriend. Hello, everyone. Answers to a few questions. A 10th grade boyfriend used drugs. When I was still in high school, I don't know if he was a lifelong drug addict, but I'm sure he was definitely an addict. He may have quit drugs for now, or he may not have. 2 of my grade 10 boyfriends have been to my house many times. My parents still live in the same house where I grew up. My grade 10 boyfriend came over many times when we were in high school. I don't know where he lives now, but he grew up 10 minutes away from my parents' house. 3 of my grade 10 boyfriends broke up with me, and it was a terrible breakup. I met my high school sweetheart on a date, and it ended badly. He held a grudge throughout high school and hated me so much that he even bullied me at one point. I had to get security to escort me to class because he and his friends were bullying me really badly. The bullying only lasted until the second semester of 10th grade, but he hated me throughout high school. At one point, he did apologize to me and explained that I was just heartbroken because I broke up with him, but by then I couldn't forgive him. We may have run into each other once or twice after high school when I was home for college breaks, and he was very friendly and we had a good laugh. I could totally try to contact him on Facebook again and reopen this mystery, along with updates from his ex-girlfriend, to see what his reaction is and judge whether he is telling the truth. I could also ask some high school friends who knew him to find out what his current situation is and see if he is involved in anything suspicious. My stepsister only gave me the name of my ex-girlfriend and the description from the party, but I can go to her 10th grade boyfriend's Facebook, find her under his friends, and then contact her through FA Spook Messenger to ask about the Ring video and ask her more questions to see if she contacted the police. I agree that this may be the best way to get more answers if I want to get more answers, but I agree that I need to be careful because I still don't know what happened here. The 6 10th grade boyfriends did not have any brothers, only a sister. I remember coming back from high school and deciding to try to find out the girl's full name in order to find her on social media. I may even be able to find her just by the name I know. My step told me that I could go to 10th grade boyfriend's Facebook and look for a girl with the same name in his friends list. She may have looked like his ex-girlfriend. He may even have a picture with her and tagged her name, so it shouldn't be too hard, unless they emptied her social media after the breakup. When I can find her, I will contact her and try to get some answers. I think this is the safest route, as I still don't know the role of the 10th grade boyfriend in this matter. I did ask him once, and he claimed he had nothing to do with it and didn't know anything about it, which could be true or a lie, as my stepmom said the girl was very scared. I bet she would be willing to talk to me about it, as we have the same experience.